In today's video, we have many updates to cover, including some updates on the new Seattle franchise. We have the latest on the Minnesota Wild GM search. We have some updates on the Red Wings and Bruins. Plus, we have some new updated NHL rumors on many of the outstanding free agents around the NHL. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of items to cover today, so let's jump right in with a couple of quick hits here, including Adam Erne signing a new contract with the Detroit Red Wings after they acquired him from the Tampa Bay Lightning yesterday. They signed a one-year contract, just over $1 million, I believe it was $1.05 million. With the Red Wings now after being acquired, like I said, it's hard to imagine how they couldn't come to terms in Tampa. I'm thinking that it must have been other negotiations like the Braden Point contract and overall cap situation, which kind of triggered that deal more than anything else. But it certainly does leave the Tampa Bay Lightning a little short on the forward depth area, which I mentioned yesterday, which is going to likely mean a couple of younger players are going to step up and get opportunities. But of course, Adam Erne's not overly old and was fairly new to being a regular NHL player, so not really sure why they decided to go down that route. I guess any cap savings they can get helps, as well as the fact, like I said, an entry-level contract would still be a little cheaper than this deal. But either way, he should be a good fit for Detroit. Obviously, Stevie Yzerman knows him quite well from his days in Tampa, and he's inked him to a one-year contract. Like I said, just over $1 million. Now, another quick note here as well. The Boston Bruins have now finally officially signed defenseman Alex Petrovic to a professional tryout to come to training camp with the Bruins. Of course, this is basically a contingency plan should they not have McAvoy and Carlo under contract for the upcoming season when training camp opens. We've heard recent comments from members of the Bruins organization, including Cam Neely and Don Sweeney, indicating that they have to be prepared here for the possibility that they don't have contracts in place for two of their top RFA defensemen when training camp opens, and that they might have to do some other moves. Well, this certainly falls into that category. I'm not sure if Alex Petrovic will stand a good chance of making the team. I think he will if McAvoy and Carlo are sitting out, but if they are signed, I'm not really sure if he'll work out there longer term or not. Kind of depends on the health of Kevin Miller and other guys as well. So either way, it's an interesting move by the Bruins, some extra depth, a precautionary measure in case those other guys aren't signed. And like I said, for other guys on PTOs as well, sometimes you go to camp, you get into some preseason games. If things are looking good, you might not necessarily get a contract with the team that you're with, but other organizations are watching other guys as well. And either way, it could lead to him getting an NHL contract in some capacity with some team. And it's a smart move by the Bruins to have an experienced player on hand just in case. Here's some more updates on the new Seattle franchise here as well. Of course, many of us are kind of anxiously waiting to find out officially what the team name's going to be. I know we've discussed on the channel on numerous occasions what it might be. We've heard all kinds of speculation and what the latest names are based on things that are registered by the ownership group and etc. But we really don't know for sure what it's going to be. But based on recent comments from the newly appointed GM, Ron Francis, he expects a name to be officially announced sometime in early 2020. He said they have a marketing team working on that. And obviously, he's trying to stay out of it. It's not really part of what his job is, but they're trying to make sure they come up, with the best team name and all the marketing and everything that goes with it. So we should hopefully get a full update on that and an announcement sometime early in the new year. As we know, Gary Bettman in the NHL likes to make announcements around other big events, so maybe we'll get something around the time of an All-Star game or another big event going on early in the NHL sometime in January, February. But we'll wait to be seen, but we shouldn't have to wait too much longer to get the official team name for the Seattle franchise. Now, Ron Francis also indicated that he'd like to hire an assistant GM sometime here in the near future, obviously to work alongside with him to start preparing for the expansion draft and everything that's going to go into setting up this team. He'd also like to hire approximately 5 scouts in the short term as well. I would imagine most of those will be pro scouts. I mean, there could be some amateur scouts in there to kind of get a look ahead to what the players coming through for the drafts when they're going to be picking in a couple of years' time. But I would imagine the bulk of them to get started right away would be working on the pro side of the game to kind of get an eye on a lot of guys that they feel might be available when the expansion draft comes around. Now, Francis also indicated as well that they plan to hire a full team of analytics people to kind of help them with the expansion draft and all the tools they have available as well. So should be plenty of hires coming in the short term for the Seattle franchise. Obviously, we'll have more updates on that as that happens, but they're certainly working on getting their staff in place and starting to work ahead for the expansion draft. Even though we're quite a ways away, as we know, the more time you have, the better. It gives you more time to study players and kind of plan ahead for the future here. Now, the latest on the Minnesota Wild GM search from athletic writers Michael Russo and Andy Strickland indicate that the front runner might actually be Pittsburgh assistant GM Billy Guerin. certainly a strong possibility that he very well could land this job. He's a well-respected assistant GM around the NHL, has done a pretty good job with the Penguins over the last number of years. I know it's not the first time his name has come up as a potential GM candidate when other openings have taken place, and so far they have reason to believe that he's made a very good impression on the Minnesota Wild so far, between owner Craig Leopold and as well as Mike Modano, who's involved as well with this process. So we'll see what happens, but there's some other candidates still involved as well that are still believed to be, at least to be finalists, including Tom Fitzgerald of the Devils, who was a finalist last time when they hired Paul Fenton. They also believe that Ron Hextall is still considered to be in the mix, as well as other guys like Mark Hunter, who was an assistant GM with the Leafs, and of course heavily involved with the London Knights, where he's been GM and part owner with his brothers there as well. So Mark Hunter, is a great hockey mind, great scout, great eye for talent. Certainly will be more than likely get a GM role at some point in the future, but he is believed to be in consideration, as well as the Montreal Canadiens assistant Scott Mellenby, who's also a well-respected hockey man, been around the league for a long time. Of course, first as a player, then for quite a few years now as an executive. So I think that's kind of narrowed down to like your final batch of candidates here. There could be others that emerge. Maybe there's others that we're not aware of. But I think there's plenty of great options there for them to pick from amongst those guys. So we'll see what they decide. It's still likely going to be a little bit while longer before we have an official announcement. We don't have any reason to believe there's anything imminent here as of yet. But like I said before, I would imagine sometime by the end of August, 1st of September, we should have a decision made and an announcement made on who that new person is going to be. Next up, I want to take a look at the Stanley Cup champions St. Louis Blues, based on some updates here from Michael Russo, the Athletic, as well. For one, RFA forward Ivan Barbashev remains their sole player that's not under contract right now, at least as an RFA. Of course, there's also Patrick Maroon, who was a big part of their Stanley Cup championship, who was a UFA. But of course, we can't really say officially that he's property of the Blues at this point, but I do have updates on both players. Obviously, Ivan Barbashev right now, there doesn't appear to be anything close to getting a contract done. Many believe that he must be looking for a contract over $2 million. If you look at their salary cap space, and I'll give you a quick snapshot here from capfriendly.com to show you what they have available. Obviously, they're getting a little bit tight, and there's not a lot of money there to sign him, and if there's any hope of bringing Pat Maroon back as well, then it's going to have to be, a fairly reasonable contract. But many believe he must be looking for about $2 million or more, which is kind of what's holding things up here. Of course, there was no arbitration process with him to get this settled either, which certainly is why this is dragging on. So when it comes to Barbashev, it's really difficult to say, but right now there's no updates. It seems to be a ways off on contracts. I'm guessing the team probably would prefer something closer to $1 to $1.5 million. I mean, he's been with the organization at the pro level for about 3 years now. Last year was really his first full NHL campaign. He had a pretty good year. I believe he put up 14 goals. He was a key component in their bottom six. Didn't put up a ton of points, but certainly contributed in many other ways as well, and did have some points. So he was a pretty solid option for them throughout the playoffs. So he certainly deserves another opportunity and an opportunity to become a bigger part of the team. But they're going to have to find a way to bridge that gap and get him under contract if there's any hope of getting it resolved here before training camp. Now, when it comes to Patrick Maroon, there's reports from Russo indicating that he has up to 6 job offers on the table that he's mulling over. Many believe still that his first choice is still to return to the St. Louis Blues. Of course, he's from the area. They just won the Stanley Cup. I'm sure he does not want to leave, but at the same time, he has to factor in his hockey future, his financial future, and all that. I'm not sure if there's any multi-year deals on the table. I know many believe that he would be looking for a 2 or 3 year contract if he was able to get it, because this might be his last opportunity to get a bigger, longer-term contract where he's coming off of a decent year in the playoffs. I mean, his regular season wasn't the best, but he certainly had a strong playoff, helped them win the Stanley Cup, and that certainly goes a long way to adding to your value as well. And with the game the way it is, many think that this might be his last crack at a longer-term, multi-year contract, but so far nothing's materialized for Maroon. He very well might settle on another 1-year deal to kind of continue to prove himself. Could that be in St. Louis? Maybe, but it's certainly going to be pretty tough for them to make room for him, and he's got to consider other options. I'm sure GM Doug Armstrong's open to the idea, but at the same time, he doesn't want to sacrifice many of his younger players from getting more opportunity as the team moves forward here as well. So a tough choice for Armstrong, but it is believed that Maroon has up to 6 opportunities to pick from. It's not quite known really who all the teams are at this point, but we'll see what happens with Patrick Maroon. I do suspect he will sign somewheres before training camp gets underway. Now let's jump over and take a look at the New York Rangers. Now, of course, they are also another team that's tight on salary cap space after making several big moves throughout this offseason. Of course, we saw them sign Artemi Panarin when they landed the big fish in free agency. They got Jacob Trouba under contract, which turned out to be a fairly mega deal as well. And now they're tight on space, and they still have RFAs. Brendan Lemieux and defenseman Tony DeAngelo still sitting without contracts at this point in time. They need to try to work out something before training camp gets underway. Now, I'll show you a snapshot of their cap situation as well from Cap Friendly. Now, it shows them with just over $1 million available, but that's certainly eligible to be changed. A couple of easy things they can do there. Right now, Cap Friendly has them with 14 NHL forward contracts, one of them being Matt Beleskey at $1.8 million. Obviously, Beleskey, 99.9% sure will not make this team. It will end up playing in the minors. He will get buried, which is obviously going to give them a little over $1 million in extra cap space, and they very well could demote another player because a lot of the guys on there are waivers exempt, can go to the minors without that because of the lack of playing experience. So they could probably create themselves, about $1.7, $1.8 million extra by making a couple of roster moves just like that. So that would actually end up putting them up, around 2.8 to 3, depending on who the players ended up being demoted. But based on their situation as well, it only gives them 6 defensemen right now. So it's really important that they get DeAngelo signed. He's going to be a big part of their team for the next few years, I think. So obviously, both of these guys need contracts. There's not really a lot to update on, but there was some comments from Brendan Lemieux's agent, who's also his dad, former NHLer Claude Lemieux, who said they are having negotiations, they are talking, but he cannot comment to say that anything is really close to them signing a new contract. So many believed earlier, especially Larry Brooks of the New York Post, that Lemieux and DeAngelo would sign for their qualifying offer amounts, which obviously would not be a whole lot. But at this point, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think both of them have earned an opportunity to make a little bit more. I know Lemieux made an excellent impression upon the Rangers after his arrival from the Jets after the trade towards the end of last season. So obviously he's looking for a little bit more money, and I think he probably deserves at least a 1-year contract, a little bit more money. DeAngelo, I can see them maybe trying to sign him a little bit longer, but I guess time will tell. Right now the Rangers do have some decisions to make, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of progress being made on these 2 RFAs. Quick update here too as well on forward Patrick Marleau, who's obviously been around the league for a long time. I mentioned reports the other day from the Toronto Sun and Steve Simmons indicating that he believed that the Sharks weren't interested in bringing Marleau back, and obviously now there's another report of Kevin Kurz of The Athletic, who covers the Sharks a little closer. I think his sources likely would be a little stronger than Simmons, and he's kind of reporting on a similar type of thing. Now, he's not saying that they don't want him, but what he's saying is he believes it's a no-brainer that Joe Thornton will sign and be back. Just a matter of letting Doug Wilson have more time to shape the roster, and that they're likely looking to make some other moves to kind of determine what their final cap space amount is going to be. A couple of things with the Sharks is that through free agency, they've also obviously lost some guys, and they're a little bit weak in their right wing spot right now. So they believe that Wilson likely is trying to figure out a way to boost the right side of the forward group, so they might be trying to make another acquisition. And they also believe that there is a possibility that they might be trying to improve the goaltending situation and maybe moving Aaron Dell and make an upgrade in the backup goaltender position. I mean, I don't think Jones is going anywhere as of right now. The contract would likely be difficult to move, and he did have a better playoff last year compared to the regular season. Obviously, Martin Jones has been a little shaky and inconsistent over the last year or two, but I don't think anything would be imminent there. But he believes between the backup goalie position, which very well could save them some money if they decide to go in a different route. I mean, Dell's not making a ton of money, but there probably would be other options out there to save them a bit of cap space that way. But at the same time, like I said, they also need to boost that right winger. After Kevin LeBanc, they don't have a whole lot of depth on that right side after losing Pavelski and Donskoy, etc. through free agency. So that certainly hurt their forward depth on that side. So Doug Wilson's likely trying to make other moves. Patrick Marleau mainly plays center or left wing. Doesn't really fit what they're needing in that direction. Many believe after the negotiations that didn't go the greatest for him re-signing, he went to the Leafs. Then, of course, he helped with the recruitment process for them to get John Tavares when he was there. And, of course, San Jose was bidding for his services as well. And some believe that maybe the relationship between Marleau and the Sharks is not as strong as it used to be, and that they're not really going to put too much effort into bringing him back, that they'd rather maybe go with Thornton and try to go in a different direction than Patrick Marleau. So let me know what you think. Does Marleau return to the Sharks? Is that relationship actually fractured? Or do you think they will come to terms on a 1-year deal at the league minimum? So that is all your latest updates for today. Of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments section, and we can continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel as well, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. We have a couple of NHL offseason series going on right now, covering all the top NHL prospects, as well as a GM report card series going on as well. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.